My name's Karen Michelle and welcome back if you're a returning subscriber. Today's video is going to be different from any video I've done before. Okay, so today the meal we're going to be cooking is lomito. It is a Peruvian dish. A lot of the dishes I'll be cooking in the future will probably have some sort of Peruvian influence because my mom is from Peru, and as a result I've eaten a lot of food that she's cooked, and obviously that's where she grew up, so that's the kind of food she cooks. Anyways, lomito is one of my favorite dishes, if not the favorite, my most favorite thing that I cook. I probably cook it 1 or 2 times a month. It drives my mom crazy that I eat it so much, but it's one of my favorite things to eat. So I'm going to teach you how to cook it. It's probably one of the easiest things to cook. And if you're a picky eater, you're probably going to look at this dish and think that you will never like it, but I promise, give it a chance. It is really good. And if you're not a fan of tomatoes, you're not a fan of onions, still cook the dish with the tomatoes and the onions, but you can be like me and avoid eating the tomatoes and onions, because although I do cook the meat with tomatoes and onions, I don't eat the tomatoes and onions. I know you're supposed to, but I don't. I might try, this time, but most of the time I don't. I'm going to get to the ingredients in this meal. Now let's show you what you need. Alright, so here's the list of ingredients that you're going to need to cook this meal. I suggest that you pause this and take a picture of it or write it down so you can buy these ingredients if you don't already have them. First, you're going to want to start with the sirloin steak. You need that. I suggest for you to buy a thin cut of sirloin steak. If you cannot find a thin cut, then just buy regular sirloin steak and use a masher to make it thin. You're going to need Crisco oil. That's basically to deep fry the french fries. You can do it whatever way you want. If you bake your french fries, bake them. If you use peanut oil instead of Crisco oil, do it that way. Fry your french fries however you like. That's just my suggestion of the way I do it. And then you're going to need olive oil or avocado oil. And this is so whenever you cook the tomatoes, onions, and meat, you need a little bit of oil in the pan. So I guess you could use vegetable oil, but I suggest for you to use olive or avocado oil because it's healthier. Then you're going to need salt and pepper, a thing of garlic, like a garlic clove, 1 onion, and then 2 to 3 tomatoes, just depending on the size of the tomatoes. Basically, the way I judge that is however many onions I'm using is however much tomatoes I'm going to use, if that makes sense. And then you're going to need a potato or frozen french fries. In this case, I know I'm showing you potato, but I actually use frozen french fries to cook my french fries. And then you're going to need some soy sauce and then vinegar. I just have apple cider vinegar, so that's why I have it, but you can use regular vinegar. And then you will need some rice. To start this off, you're going to want to start with the garlic clove because you're literally going to put garlic in every single thing that you cook, even the rice. And the way I cut my garlic is instead of trying so hard to remove the husk at the beginning, I actually just cut the top and back part off of the garlic clove, and then usually the husk, it just falls off after that. So after I remove the husk of the garlic clove, there's a few ways that you can get the garlic minced. Basically, if you have a cheese grater, then you're going to leave it the way it is, and you're going to just grate it through the cheese grater. If you have a garlic masher like I do, you're going to want to dice the garlic into fairly normal size pieces. They don't have to be tiny. And then you're going to smash it through the garlic masher. And then if you have neither of those, then you're going to want to dice the garlic into tiny little pieces and then smash it with a spoon. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is cook the rice. You're going to want to add 2 cups of hot water to the pan. The hot water just makes the water boil quicker. And then you're going to add about a tablespoon of oil to the water. Then wait till that boils. Unfortunately, I cut the steak off camera. So just trying to show you here that you're going to want to cut the steak into little thin slices, much like you would if you were cutting up fajita steak meat. And then once the water is boiling, you're going to want to pour in the rice, stir it up a little bit, add some salt and the minced garlic, stir it up one more time, bring the boil down to a simmer, place the hood on top of it and make sure that the steam is able to vent. And you just leave it like that for 20 minutes, and after about 20 minutes the rice will be done. So while the rice is cooking, you're gonna want to add the olive oil to the pan that you're gonna cook the meat, the onions, and the tomatoes in, and make sure that it is at a high heat. I'm not sure what exact temperature, but I usually put it on 6 or 7 if you have one of those kind of stoves with the knobs, and that usually does the trick because you're wanting to stir fry everything. You don't want to boil the meat or the onions or tomatoes, which what will happen if you put too much meat at once or you don't have the temperature high enough. And so once you add the oil, you're going to add some garlic, and then once the garlic starts sizzling / caramelizing, whatever you call it, you are going to want to add about half of the meat that you have cut up. And I say half because, again, if you add too much meat, it is going to boil. Add a teaspoon of soy sauce to the meat, and you will do the same steps when you cook the other batch of meat. Once your meat is finished cooking, place it into a separate bowl. Then repeat this step. Now, while the second batch of meat is cooking, I'm going to start cutting the onion. I cut the onion much like I do the garlic clove. I cut off both ends of the onion, and then usually the husk is very easy to come off, and sometimes I will take off the first layer of the onion just to make sure that I have the entire husk off. And then I cut the onion into 4 slices, like quarters. And then I slice each quarter into wedges. And then once you separate the wedges, you will have little strips of onions. Remember, you want strips. You don't want to dice the onion or tomatoes. Now, once the onions are cut, you're going to add them to the pan after the meat is finished cooking. And again, it takes about 5 or 10 minutes for each thing to basically get stir fried. So while the onions are cooking, I'm going to now cut the tomato. And again, you cut it much like you do the onion into 4 little quarters. And then you slice the tomatoes into little wedges. Obviously, you're not going to be able to separate the tomato like the onion and get strips out of it. So you're going to get little tomato wedges, which is totally fine. Once the onions are finished cooking, you're also going to place the onions in a separate bowl, much like the meat, and then add the tomatoes. Once the tomatoes are added, you're going to add the vinegar, about a tablespoon, to the tomatoes that are cooking. And remember, this is all still on a very high heat. Once the tomatoes are soft, you will now add in the meat and the onions and turn the heat down to a simmer and leave the dish covered for about 20 minutes simmering. Now, this should have taken about 20 minutes altogether, which would mean that the rice should be done. Do a little taste test, of course, and if it's soft, obviously the rice is done, and shut off the heat. You can leave it on the stove, just turn the heat off. Then you're going to start cooking your French fries. However you cook them, whether you bake or deep fry them, it is your prerogative. Once the French fries are done cooking, everything should be ready to eat. In Peru, some restaurants serve this dish the way it is presented here with everything side by side, but also some restaurants mix the rice, French fries, and the meat, tomatoes, and onions all together and eat it that way. You can also get a tortilla and wrap it up into a burrito. Either way you want to eat it, it is up to you. I will try in the future to make my cooking videos more exciting. I feel like this one was a little bit lackluster, but if you watched it, I really appreciate it. This is one of my favorite dishes. You will not regret cooking this meal. It is absolutely delicious, I promise. So anyways, give this a like if you like the video. Subscribe to me if you want to see more of this content. If you're already subscribed to me, I appreciate you watching my video. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter or Instagram. And if you want to directly message me, Twitter will be your best bet. So thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all in
another video this week.